Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're starting off the new year with this series on health and spirituality. And we're glad you're here, and I am really excited to have Pam Hausner with us. She is a mindful meditation leader, and I have just had the privilege of getting to know her through a friend that we have in common. And so I am so glad that you're here today, Pam. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your schedule. I'd like to maybe start by just you introducing yourself to the audience and let people know a little bit about maybe your background and who you are and how you've come to this field of mindful meditation.
Thank you so much, Fred. I really appreciate being here. I've really appreciated our conversations together and getting to know you better. My background, my father was an Assembly of God pastor for most of my life. And then in my teens, he left the assemblies to form in some independent works because he felt like the assemblies were getting too liberal. So that lets you know that I had a very conservative upbringing. Right. We were like conservative of the conservatives. Women that could wear sandals were liberal for us, right? So wow. There were a lot of rules there. And I met my husband at Ozark Bible Institute, which is a Bible institute in southern Missouri in Neosho. That also is very strict. That is also a part of the Assemblies of God. But they've maintained those standards that were meaningful to my father. And so I met my husband there. We married. We had 3 children. We were up in Michigan in a very rural area when my oldest daughter was approaching school age. So the schools there were failing, and I didn't really know what to do. And I ran across a book on home education. So I thought, well, hey, let's give this a shot. It was illegal in Michigan at the time, but the schools are failing. So I don't know. I just don't felt like I had a lot of choice. And my school experience was not pleasant. My husband's school experience was not good. So we were open to alternatives. So we started homeschooling, and we ended up homeschooling our children all the way through. And we were leaders in the homeschool community. We did a lot of workshops and presentations, and we enjoyed it. We loved it very much. But in that process of homeschooling, we were going to this smaller church where it was predominantly homeschooled, and the homeschool families there. And there were a few families there that were African American. And they really challenged me and my worldview. They challenged me. They were certainly staunch believers, but what they did was sort of loosen the soil of how I stood in the earth. They helped me see that there is another way of being in this world than the way I had assumed that my experience was what everybody's experience was, as far as understanding how society worked. They gave me new lenses, and it really challenged my way of seeing the world. So I began to authentically meet people outside of my worldview. And shortly after this started happening kind of concurrently, you know how time overlaps things, I also started getting out of the house more and meeting more people outside of my worldview. And it's not like I didn't have friends. You know, we all have friends outside of our worldview, but there's sort of a place where we draw the line as how close those friends can be. And I started having friends probably through my work. At this point, I was making websites and doing marketing. And so I was meeting a lot of people that were Jewish, that were Christians, that weren't any kind of flavor of the way I understood Christianity. And yet they were Christians. And so it just really started to open that up. But racism really is what brought the awareness that there's a different way of seeing. And so when that happened for me, now everything became suspect. Now I could question everything. I knew I needed a new education. I needed to see, like, all those questions that I had, even from childhood and my teen years. I love my father so very much, and he was a very wise man. But sometimes his answers didn't really satisfy. But because I had so much trust in him, I just accepted his answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my own Bible studies, I would come across things that I felt would conflict with each other, or questions that just didn't seem answered by what I was finding in the scriptures. And so I let those questions rise up. Now it was fair game. Everything's fair game, because once you realized, oh, your lenses are cracked, you need new glasses. You need to, like, how should I see the world? So I started, like, well, it led me down, this whole new education led me down kind of the big three: racism, which led to capitalism, which led to patriarchy. So those three, right, they tend to go hand in hand. So I just began to devour books on race, books on patriarchy and feminism, books on economics. I read E.F. Schumacher, and I thought, what am I doing reading a book on economics? I devoured books on spirituality with all kinds of views of the Bible, roots of Christian theologies, world religions, ancient and modern, because part of it was like, if God so loved the world, how could he toast everybody? How come, like, I kind of pictured the kitchen table, because I'm just a common person. I pictured the kitchen table with a speck of pepper on it. And that speck of pepper, if you think of all the lives that have ever lived, that speck of pepper would be those that actually got to go to heaven based on my upbringing, right? And all the others, everybody else is going to hell for eternity. And that made no sense. If God so loved the world, why is he toasting everybody? So how did God try to reach out to people? Like, throughout history, what were God's ways of connecting to people, and what did that look like? So I just started exploring different things. I got trained in Transcendental Meditation. I explored some New Age stuff. But I realized I really needed something that didn't require religious beliefs or a faith system to go with it. I needed something that was no woo-woo at all. And it's not like I don't believe that there's something very spiritual and powerful that guides all of our lives. But for me to, at this point in my life, I really needed something that didn't include any of that. And that was mindfulness meditation. It gave me a spiritual practice without any dogma, without any woo-woo. And it did come from Buddhism, but it's not religious. And the practice of it is completely secular. So it helped me to address many areas of wounding from my background. It satisfied, when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and he said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. It resonated there. That was a scripture that was one of them that it had puzzled me, because in my framework of theology, it didn't make sense. But now with mindfulness meditation, it makes perfect sense. So what it does, like, if you think of something beautiful, like a beautiful sunset, you're just drawn to it and you just stop and you're drawn into the beauty of it. You're drinking it in with awe and awareness, trying to capture all of that. That's essentially the heart of mindfulness. It's like this heightened awareness of the present moment. And it's not something that comes naturally, especially in our modern world where, like, we're 24/7 plugged in, and we're just lost in this torrent of thoughts, and our modern mind is just like all the time, right? But when we can slow down and be quiet and fully in this moment, we see things, we hear things, we smell things in a more vibrant way. The sights, the sounds, the taste, the sensations of the body, we're just more there for it. Most of us aren't even living our lives. I think, was it James Joyce that talked about this man that lived a few feet from his body? It's just, and that's how most of us go through our life. We're just busy, busy, busy with thoughts and doing and thoughts and doing. I like this quote by Marcel Proust, and he says, "The very real voyage of discovery consists not of new landscapes, but of having new eyes." I feel like for me, mindfulness meditation did that. It gave me new eyes to see what my experience is. And it's incredibly simple, right? But it's difficult for us to do, to be more present with our senses simply by slowing down a bit.
Excellent. I think about my own experience with meditation. I would say my years as a pastor, most of my meditation would have been on Scripture itself, right? And then I love nature. And so I've spent a lot of time just in nature, walking, praying, reflecting, and that's been a big part of my life. But in terms of an actual disciplined practice of other types of meditation, I really had none. And then 2 years ago, I went to rehab, and I was in rehab for like 120 days. It was a long stint. And in rehab, I got exposed to several different types of meditation, and I think including mindfulness meditation, and even had some people take us through some guided meditations. And then when I got back home, I actually sought out a few places where they practiced mindfulness meditation. And like, I feel like I'm like just barely a beginner. I don't feel like I've dove into this like I need to or want to, either one. So when I was thinking about this health and spirituality, I wanted personally to explore mindfulness meditation for myself, but I'm thinking that the studies, I was aware that some of the studies behind it are amazing in terms of what it does, just the science behind it. But, and I can honestly say that in some of the guided meditations, I experienced, I think, I don't even know how to describe it, but some space and connection within myself that I hadn't ever experienced before. And so it's kept me like going, I need to do this more. So I'm so glad you're here. Give us just a little bit. What is the difference between mindfulness meditation and maybe any other numbers of meditation? Because I think a lot of people are out there listening may or may not have very much experience with mindfulness meditation. I'm guessing that a lot haven't, but I don't know that to be true, but I'm just guessing. So help us. What is mindfulness meditation in this whole field of meditation? What is exactly mindfulness meditation?
There is a lot of different types of meditation. There are a lot of different types of meditation. And, just to encourage you, when you say, I feel like I'm just at the beginning and very new at this, you can't do it wrong. You just can't. Being aware, how can you be aware wrong, right? You can't do that in a wrong way. So, like I was trained in Transcendental Meditation, right? It was my first foray into all this. And they give you a mantra. You go through this little ceremony in which they, I think it's probably Hindu in its background, because they chanted some words that I could not understand. There was a little idol that the person that was leading this was kind of bowing to. And, I just like, that's not what I, really want to do, but I'm going to give this a shot, right? The old college try. And so you just repeat this mantra for 20 minutes. And so that's a type of concentration meditation. But it's not really mindfulness. There are New Age meditations. Again, I'm speaking from my own experience. A lot of different types of those that would sometimes incorporate spiritual concepts that just didn't like, I don't know, aliens and all kinds of different things, right?
Yep.
So that's not what I was looking for. There's the contemplative traditions, which mindfulness is a contemplative practice for sure. But I think what makes it unique is it really is about slowing down and being aware of what's arising. And there's different ways you can do mindfulness meditation. There's a loving kindness meditation or metta meditation, where you think loving and kind thoughts for yourself, and then you kind of expand circles out for someone close to you, then someone neutral, then someone who's maybe difficult, and then the whole world, right? So you kind of expand those loving thoughts. There's different types of concentration meditation, but it leads to, sometimes you can just like focus on a candle burning or focus on your breath. There are some people that spend their whole lives in meditation practice that do nothing but focus on the breath. Mm-hmm. But mindfulness meditation, which has a number of different interpretations, the modern one that we all seem to adapt to is mindfulness meditation, but it could even easily be awareness meditation or insight meditation. Because what it does is it teaches you, you have this anchor. So it could be your breath. It could be part of your body that maybe is pulsating, or something that's safe and comfortable for you where you can land on. And then you just notice what thoughts arise, right? And maybe it's an emotion, and you start out just sort of noticing what that feels like in your body. And the point is, you don't judge it. You do this without judging, because what happens when you're on defense, right? If you're defensive or you're resisting something, you can't hear what's being said. You can't learn from it. Your defenses are up. So you come into this with no judging. And then you do this enough and you start to see patterns maybe that are arising. One of the patterns that emerged for me was just noticing thoughts that were coming to my mind that were always defensive. I was always trying to defend something, which, kind of led down to a deep-rooted insecurity in myself that somehow I needed to prove something. I think some of it maybe had to do with shame. This inability perhaps to speak confidently to what my experience was at the time, because I was transitioning from decades deeply rooted in a very conservative Christian worldview. So a lot of it had to do with that. But you start to notice these, and then as you notice this, and because you're meeting it with friendly curiosity, and you're allowing space and you're not judging it, it gives enough of a pause or enough of a space. So now that you can see kind of what's underneath it, or maybe the belief underneath the thought, that you can now respond. And instead of reacting, you're responding. A real practical example maybe of what this looks like is, I live in a home with other adults, and they have different ideas of maybe what clean looks like, right? So maybe I cleaned the kitchen and went to bed, and when I wake up, the kitchen's not so clean anymore, right? And just being able to, instead of my reaction, like being mad and blaming and getting, angry and chewing out somebody, I was able to pause and think, I love these people. I want a healthy relationship with these people. And let's see how we can talk about this to find a solution that works for everybody. So it's just simple things like that just really change your life. Instead of living in reactivity, now I'm empowered. And in that empowerment, I can take responsibility. Because sometimes, honestly, Fred, sometimes this insight isn't pretty. Sometimes seeing what's inside of me or understanding how I've hurt people is not fun. But when we can fully be honest and fully embrace what's happening, there is, through that, really a joy that it's just very difficult to touch in other ways.
I found that one of the things that I had done throughout my life was basically subdue, try to conquer, ignore, whatever you want to call it, my negative emotions. So fear, anger, disgust, things like that. I really, really felt like those were maybe a part of my old nature that I needed to die to. And so I had this idea that I needed to suppress these negative feelings. And one of the things I've learned is that suppression of those negative emotions ultimately made me ill in a number of ways. And so part of the thing that I've found beneficial in this awareness, this mindfulness meditation, is to actually locate my feelings in my body, actually figure out what these feelings are and where they're coming from and why they're there, and actually try to listen to them. And I never learned how to do that before I went to rehab. And it's been a learning process. I'm still learning, but like body scanning and then trying to be an observer of these emotions and identify them has been really interesting to me. And a lot of the stuff that I've read on feelings is that it is critically important to listen, identify negative feelings, not just suppress them, and then begin, and so that's an interesting part of this. Like, it's not the only part. Like, you're talking about the awareness of the defensiveness that you were talking about. Well, I'm sure that probably manifested as a feeling of some sort, that defensiveness, maybe. I don't know. Is it all about feelings, or is it about all kinds of things, thoughts, emotions,
it's your
feelings?
Experience.
The whole of your life.
The whole of your experience. And when you're talking about feelings and emotions, there's no wrong feeling. Any feeling you have is part of the human experience. It's your relationship with that feeling. So being raised the way I was, anger was a bad thing. There is the verse, be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. So you're supposed to have short accounts. You deal with it before you go to bed, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just doesn't go away that fast, does it?
Right.
Or sometimes you're angry about something you're not supposed to be angry about.
Right.
So you stuff that down.
Mm-hmm.
So what this would do is, like, when you touch on, and anger, what we know now about anger is just a trigger that a boundary's been crossed. So when you see that anger arising, you can now look, what boundary has been crossed? What do I value? What are my values here? And how has that been crossed? So there are no wrong emotions. It's just how we relate to it. And it could be something as simple as just being indignant about something. Well, then that kind of goes into pride. And then, just like you can filter through this. Again, non-judging, not making anything wrong, but just being curious and understanding it.
Mm-hmm. And this was what I never did with my negative emotions. I was never curious. Well, okay, why is this? What is this coming? I just tried to handle it, like manipulate it in some way or another.
Those negative emotions, I don't like to even call them negative emotions.
Right.
Those emotions that can be considered negative.
Yeah, that's how I thought of them, though.
Yeah,
they were the ones
right.
that I wasn't supposed to have or didn't feel comfortable having.
If it's something that comes up a lot, like fear, like maybe you're being afraid of something, you could just say, oh, I see you, fear. There you are trying to protect me. Thank you so much. I got this. So you can, again, it's that, how am I relating to the fear? Mm-hmm. And just not, being a friend with it. Be a friend with fear.
That's so foreign to me.
So this pandemic.
It's like, I don't even like to feel these things.
No. So I am co-facilitating for my grandson's first grade. And it started out very bumpy this year. And I'll spare you some gory details, but it was not pretty. And I was not happy. And so I realized in the thick of this, I was like, okay, where's my practice? I even have a little timer on my phone that bings every 15 minutes to remind me to take a breath, and that just gives me enough of a pause. Okay, feel my feet, be present. And through that, I realized I was resisting what was going on. I had just a fierce resistance. I was mad that I couldn't do what I really wanted to be doing with my life. I kind of had to put most of my stuff on hold. And I thought I'd already done that for 20 years. This is supposed to be my time, right? And I didn't like how my grandson was acting. And so I was resisting that, or just resistance all over the place. And that was a turning point. Once I realized, I'm resisting this, and I could just make space for it. That's resistance. There I am. Now I can respond more lovingly. Now I can be more open about what's happening, because I recognize that was just my thought that I was having. Our thoughts are vapors. Mm-hmm. They're just nothing. There's nothing to a thought.
Receiving these emotions and these thoughts with curiosity, is that a part of awareness?
Yeah, and playfulness. Not one of my favorite stories actually is I think his name was Schuller. Oh dear, I don't want to screw up anybody's name. Anyway, he went to study the gorillas, and he was there for a number of years, and he came back and to present his findings to the scientists and says, this is what I discovered. This is how they relate to each other. And they're like, well, in fact, that Gorillas in the Mist was kind of based off somebody that studied under him. Okay. So they said, how did you learn all this? And he says, well, it was simple. I didn't carry a gun. Those gorillas, even though they might not know what a gun is, they could sense the fear. They could sense what he was bringing in. And when they learned to be calm and relaxed around him because they saw that he wasn't harmful, they could just be open with their lives. Well, when we look at our thoughts or our emotions, our feelings, and what's happening in our body, we often bring a gun. So when we come undefended, we are now open to be able to see and respond more wholesomely.
That's good. I like that. Tell us a little bit about the science behind this. I think that component for a lot of people, I like science anyway, but when I started seeing some of the research behind this, it really piqued my interest in terms of, oh man, I needed all the scientific benefits of that I read about, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Give us some of the science behind mindful meditation.
I have a spreadsheet where I started keeping links to scientific articles, and then it just got too cumbersome to keep it up. But essentially, just to let you know, what it helps, the clinical studies have shown it helps anxiety disorders, stress, depression, suicide ideation, pain management, PTSD, mood and sleep disorders. It helps build compassion. It helps with relationships, health and well-being. So they've got all this, that has been displayed through these clinical studies. And the people that it helps are veterans, cancer patients, prisoners, CEOs, pregnant and postpartum women, parents, children, students of all ages. They've been able to practice and test, with this as well. In fact, many schools are including mindfulness teaching. Anyone who wants to look to improve their style of life. So what it does is our amygdala, which is at the core of our brain, that's, right a little bit above the brainstem. I actually I'm looking over here because I have a big poster of the brain. The amygdala, it plays a crucial role in our stress responses, right? If you think for all those years, we were just really about survival and how do we stay safe. And it's only recently, if you think of the human timeline, that we've got relative safety. So our brains are still really like looking all the time, constantly looking for threats. And that's what the amygdala does. It's always looking for any detection of stress or a threat of any type, and it initiates our coping responses. So, and since we're not like going around with a spear anymore, like looking for food behind a bush. We're not hunting like that. We don't have to worry about tribes coming after us anymore. So what it's now looking for are emotions. It reacts to emotions or perceived threats, especially strong emotions like fear. And so what we found is this part of the brain is less activated following mindfulness training. Then, right along with the amygdala is the hippocampus, which is critical to learning and memory and helps regulate the amygdala. And this part of the brain is more active after mindfulness training. Then there's my beloved prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain most associated with maturity. And it actually doesn't really develop until after a child is born, when it really starts to take off for those first 6 or 7 years. And then there's another boost in the teen years. But it regulates emotions and behaviors and making wise decisions. And this part of the brain is more activated following mindfulness training. Another part of the science of this is we have, with all this activation, right, it creates neural pathways in our brain. And the more conditioning we have along a certain line creates stronger neural pathways. They can develop myelin sheaths. So if there's a lot of anxiety around something, like maybe somebody's afraid of the dark, right? And that's continually reinforced for them over and over and over. And the myelin sheath gets really strong. Even as an adult, it can be very hard to overcome that fear of the dark, because we've developed such strong conditioning for that. And if we think about different things we've been taught in society and everything that creates all this strong conditioning. And then our brain releases chemicals on top of that. So we've got dopamine that rewards you. This is a lot of where addictions come in, right? Because the dopamine helps us feel better, and it develops that electrical circuitry that makes a strong neural pathway. And so it releases dopamine. We have oxytocin that is released in social environments. So like if you're part of a church, even if the church is not a healthy place for you, that particular church may not be a healthy place for you, or a particular community. We need that oxytocin, right, to make us feel better. So we often stay in unhealthy environments. And there's other brain chemicals, so I don't know how much you want me to go into.
No, yeah, but that's like the bonding chemical, and even like it's like sex even is activate oxytocin. Yeah,
absolutely. Serotonin for importance and respect. Endorphins, it masks our pain, and cortisol is released when we have stress. So all this is going on and building up this neural pathways in our brain. And mindfulness helps us to start to create new wiring. And so one of the things they thought, well, after you're a teenager, your brain doesn't develop anymore. But now they know that's just not true. It doesn't matter what age you are. You can develop new neural pathways. So if you stop...
But it's not always as easy, is it? Like
certainly it takes work. But remember, even that first one was built over time, right? Or through a traumatic experience. It certainly can happen then as well. And they do say that pretty much everyone has had some trauma in their life.
Sure.
In the modern world. But what happens with mindfulness is because you can create a space between that stimulus and the reaction. So we can focus on an experience in the moment, whether it's the feeling of the breath or the sounds in the room, and our minds are able to quiet themselves. Remember, now we can access that prefrontal cortex, because if the amygdala is like going off, it shuts down our prefrontal cortex. So now we're in pure reactivity, we have literally lost our minds and how we're responding. So that pause, by training our minds to do that, gives us that space. So now we can be present with what's happening, and we get cues now to stop and reflect, and we can build those new neural pathways.
That's fascinating to me. What about can children benefit from this? And my specific things, because I think a lot of people that I've talked to about, like I've even done some guided meditation with groups that I've worked with, and most of us feel like we're a little bit ADD, ADHD. If you start thinking about trying to take kids through meditation, they can't sit still long enough to but can it actually help kids that have these attention deficit disorders and that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I am seeing this firsthand with my 6-year-old grandson, who he actually had his electrodes put up to his brain. I'm not really sure what type of brain scan this was, but the therapist told us on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as high activity goes, he's a 21. So that gives you a little picture of why it was so difficult for us when we first started doing school. I didn't realize what I was going to be working with. And he's just constant movement. He walks in a room and things fall just because he's all over the place, right? So we have taught, there's little practices you can do. And of course, he's not sitting on a cushion for 20 minutes or 45 minutes. Of course not. We work with him where he's at. But there's a little practice called sitting still like a frog, and he likes that. And so he can sit and just be quiet for just a minute and pay attention to his breathing. Or we've got what we call spaghetti noodle, I love this because of the embodiment of it. So he just lies down on the floor and he tenses up every muscle in his body, just like an uncooked spaghetti noodle. And he's as stiff as can be. And then he relaxes and he feels all over his body where that relaxation is. And then we have, we'll do that 2-3 times. So we have built that into his daily routine. And we're seeing a difference. Like he even told me today he was getting upset at something. And he said, he calls me Mimsy. He says, Mimsy. And I just took a breath and I could feel it in my body. And then I was okay. So he's starting to see this, and I can just imagine how much more equipped he will be when he reaches his teens and forward, to have these practices that are second nature for him. But there's a lot of
That's
I don't know
good.
if you can see this up here. This is good for kids. They can inhale, exhale. It's what do they call these things? Do you know what
I
they're
forgot
called?
the name of them.
It's these expanding balls that you just stretch out for anybody who doesn't have visual. It's a colorful ball. You can just pull on it and it expands in and out. There's so many, and you can put a teddy bear on his chest and he can just breathe and watch the teddy bear go up and down.
That's cool. So this is even with children, even with kids that have difficulty with attention spans, they're finding out that this actually can help their young developing brains become more focused, become more calm, more aware.
I really think of it as who's in the driver's seat. Most of us go through life in the passenger seat, and our mind is doing all the driving, right? And everything in our society is all about the mind, right? So it's just doing the driving. And I feel like mindfulness empowers you to actually be in the driver's seat and determine these are the thoughts that I'm going to act on. This is how I will respond to this. It just gives you that power.
Is there I suppose that the first time somebody jumps into this, they might get some benefit out of it. Is there a sense though that you, like anything, you have to practice it over a longer stretch before you actually start receiving the full benefit? I mean, I'm just assuming that's true, but I'm curious from your perspective.
They're both true. Because, like, say you're in a rage, you're just really upset, or maybe you're terrified of something, and you just pause. You're just a beginner, and you've heard, oh, pause, just pause. Take a breath. Well, you've just allowed your prefrontal cortex now to re-engage, right? So that can happen for somebody that's not even meditated, right? Just that moment of mindfulness, just really being present. There's a Thich Nhat Hanh says, wash the dishes to wash the dishes. You can just wash the dishes. You don't have to sit on your cushion. Just be with what you're doing and be fully there, right? But obviously, if we're talking about building new neural pathways, and new automatic responses, that takes practice. And so there's different types of practices. There's the formal practice where we think of sitting on a cushion or a chair. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a cushion. It could be a chair. You could lie down. There's walking meditation. There's mindful eating. There's anything you do, you can do mindfully, right? You can make a meditation practice out of it. But the more you do that, obviously, the more disciplined your mind becomes. And that was very attractive to me when I started getting into this too. I thought, I want a well-disciplined mind.
So I want you to ask you to do a guided meditation for us on our talk here. But before we do that, I mean, that's one type of meditation within the mindfulness meditation movement, is a guided meditation. Are there names for 3 or 4 other main types of meditation within the mindfulness meditation movement, or is it just so many types that you can't name them?
Yeah, I think what you're just seeing is the distinction between whether you just do it yourself and you're not listening to any audio files or any person that's telling you and guiding you through it. So that's the guided meditation, or you're just doing this on your own. So I'm not sure how to make the distinction between those two. That's like, which side of the coin do you want to use? Okay. Heads or tails?
But so all types of meditation would have similar components to it, like
Transcendental Meditation, that's all self-guided. And you have this mantra you're just repeating over and over. Right. Nobody's telling you. You're just sitting in a quiet room. So yeah, there's within the spectrum of meditations, they have different aspects.
So let's just say you're sitting in a room by yourself and you want to practice something, and you're not listening to a guided meditation. Yeah. You mentioned 2 things that you can focus on. One is your breath. Another one is some type of feeling or bodily, even pain or a hurt or something in your body. So you start with that focus on breath, or you start with that focus on a part of your body. And where do you let it take you from there if you're doing it by yourself?
Thank you for asking that question. That was really a good question. I think what I would recommend when you plan to sit and do some meditation is plan that. How long do you want to do this? Do you want to do this for 5 minutes? Do you want to do this for 20 minutes? But pick a time that's reasonable for you. And then pick an intention. Why am I doing this? What do I hope to get out of this? Right? So you understand why you're in this space. Because whatever thoughts that might arise, or whatever feelings might arise, or distractions, it's good to be able to have that intention to come back to. So then you want an anchor. Because things will come up, because you might notice, it's just amazing how much your face is going to start itching, or you'll cough. I've been in retreats before, and it's you don't really notice anybody coughing, but now that you're all sitting in silence, coughs are happening all over the place, right? So it's just allowing what happens to arise, and knowing that you can come back to this anchor when your thoughts get carried away. So a breath is a common anchor. It's free. It's what everybody has one, right? You can go everywhere you go, but the breath doesn't work for everybody. And there can be all kinds of reasons for that. It could be maybe they've got a respiratory problem. Maybe they've got some trauma around breath. So you don't know. So it doesn't really matter what your anchor is. It could be a body part. It could be something outside of your body, something that you're looking at in the room. Oh, when I learned Lamaze, right? You find a focal point. So that's essentially what you're doing is you're finding a focal point. You're just looking at this. Mm-hmm. It could be a sound. Some people like meditating to just the sound of rain or a bubbling brook, an audio file like that. And then when your thoughts and emotions come and go, you notice, oh, there's a memory. Oh, I was just remembering. Okay, then go back to the anchor, whatever that anchor is.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Well, let's do a meditation that an audience will maybe do about around 7 minutes or something like that. Help us get ready. So some of you who are listening, like when I listen to podcasts, I'm usually showering or getting ready in the morning or something like that, driving around in the car. So you might not be in the perfect space to do a meditation, but Pam, I had asked Pam to lead us in a guided meditation for, about 7 minutes. So help us get into this space, Pam, and take us on a journey.
Sure.
All right.
Well, I do recommend that you're not driving when you do a formal type meditation, because you want to have all focus on safety there. But basically, wherever you're at, just find a position where your body is comfortable and yet supported. So you're not so comfortable that you're going to fall right to sleep, but your body is supported. Jack Kornfield often says in a dignified manner. So, a lot of times they recommend having your back straight, and that's because it opens up your chest so you have freedom of breath. But really, it's just about just being comfortable. If you can plant your feet on the floor, that's great. And as you just sit there for a minute, notice if there's any areas of tension that you might release. We carry a lot of tension in the back of our neck, in our jaws, and around our eyes. Just see if you can relax those a little bit. If you feel like any one part of your body maybe is doing more work to prop you up than another part, see if you can even that out. Just relaxing and melting into whatever is supporting your body. And this little practice that we're doing today is an embodiment practice. Because as we've talked about, we often aren't used to really being with our bodies. So when you feel like you've settled in, I'm going to invite you to actually open your eyes and look around outside of the body and look around at your environment and where you're at. And maybe look at colors, notice colors that are surrounding the body, noticing shapes that are surrounding the body, the shape of the space around your body. And try to do it without any judgment about what you're seeing, making it good or bad. Just noticing what's there. And then bring an awareness to the body itself, to the skin. How does your skin feel? Do you notice a difference between the skin that's covered up with clothing and the skin that is open to the air? You feel a temperature difference, a difference of light pressure, perhaps, from the clothing. Just feeling the outside of the body. And then when you're ready, I invite you to bring your awareness to inside of the body. What's happening in there? This maybe thinking of it as being inside out. You're feeling from the inside of your body outward. Thinking of the body as awareness, as the way that you understand your experience. Just noticing what sensations are there. Any areas of vibration, pulsing, achiness. Maybe you don't feel much at all, and that's okay, because we do this without judging. We're really just noticing. This is called interoceptive, when we are noticing what we can feel inside the body. Now I invite you to spend a couple of minutes moving your awareness from inside the body to outside the body, and then back in again. So we're oscillating our awareness from inside to outside. It doesn't have to be equal time. It's just about this experience of noticing and awareness of our embodiment. How does this experience differ from bringing your awareness inside the body to the awareness of outside the body? How is that experience different for you? You might be noticing the slight movement of air around you, the firm pressure of the chair beneath you, or your weight of the feet on the floor. You may be feeling the expansion and contraction of the belly and the chest area as you breathe in and out. Maybe feeling the breath as it sort of massages you on the inside. And in this quiet embodiment, we can ask, what are you feeling right now? Can you name it? Where is it? Where does your body experience that feeling? Is it a release or an expansion? A tightening or contraction? A vibration? And if what you're experiencing is difficult, perhaps something painful, can you treat it with tenderness and allow a little more space for it? Inhale, noticing. With each inhale, just noticing what's there. With each exhale, relaxing, melting down a little bit more. In another moment, we will transition to end this practice. So just enjoy being with the quietness, being with your own body. Feeling your seat in the chair, your feet on the floor, your arms resting on whatever is supporting them. Feeling the breath move in and out. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. How do you feel?
It was good. Haven't eaten much today. So my stomach was kind of growling a little bit, but, when I was moving between focusing on the inside versus my external, I found myself thinking about the audience a little bit and what they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting that even me doing this, the interviewing that I'm doing, the podcast, there's been a sense that this was the right direction for me in a time, where it's been a challenging time for me, and something that I've always associated with like God's presence is where I have these chills that run down the back of my neck and spine at times. It's always been for me associated with either God's presence or peace or sense of, even almost a sense of security and, I don't know, destiny is the right word or not, but a sense of like God's with me, or what, I don't know, to try to put language around that but that it's always brought comfort in some way or another. And that happened multiple times just in this 7 minutes that we were doing this. And I thought that's interesting, just an awareness of that. So I felt a lot of peace. I didn't feel a lot of anxiety, which anxiety is one of my traveling partners. But so it was good.
So I think it's beautiful that you have been able to identify a sensation in your body that you connect to, spiritual connection, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. That's a very beautiful thing. And why do you think that happened when we were doing this whole practice?
My sense was that it was just like an assurance that I'm in the right space, doing the right thing, even with my life in general, which was, I wasn't, that's what came up for me. It wasn't that, and I wasn't looking for that. I certainly wasn't expecting that. So.
Well, I love the embodiment connection of that oscillation, right? Just bringing it in and out. And I wanted to give something for your audience and for you that that you can always do that. Just move in and out, and just feel and bring awareness to that experience, no matter where you're at.
Excellent. So what are some resources for people if people have, maybe they've not practiced this much, or maybe they haven't experienced it? Could be some people out there who are very experienced, but what are some resources that you would have available yourself, and maybe some that you would direct people to?
Sure.
As we kind of close our time together.
Well, I have some favorites, of course. Certainly I would recommend looking at the Midwest Alliance for Mindfulness. They are located in Leawood, Kansas, in the greater Kansas City area. But during the time of the pandemic, everything's online.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take advantage of, they have a number of different classes and well-trained teachers. They do mindfulness-based stress reduction. They have something called ACT, which is and I wanted to take ACT myself, but it's done by this therapist that specializes in it, that just helps you accept and connect, acceptance and connection therapy, I believe is what it is. But they have classes on that. They have a strong outreach for the LGBTQ community and people of color communities. We even have a teacher there that offers meditations in Spanish. And they have monthly half-day retreats that you can do online right now. So I would really recommend that.
Okay.
North of the river, where we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a small group we've started called Northland Meditation Friends, where we meet every other week and just spend an hour together. One of us will maybe bring a teaching or just share of our experience, and then we do some kind of a meditation practice. We kind of leave that open to whatever is arising from the community. It's very emergent. We just finished working through the book called Mindful of Race by Ruth King, which was very powerful because most of the people in our group are white, and it helped them see things again through a new lens, which we felt was really timely considering the social issues that are now again resurfacing and being brought to the front of our minds. In the fall, in the spring, March, April, and May, I'll be offering a 12-week course called Healing from Religious Wounds. And this is for people who have been hurt by their maybe an attachment to some doctrinal teachings that have harmed them, people in the religious world that they felt they could trust that have disappointed them. And it's really sort of an intro to mindfulness, mm-hmm. but it's through that lens, that experience of needing to heal from religious wounds. So we welcome anyone wherever you are in your spiritual path. This is not meant to dissuade you at all from your faith. We welcome people of faith in this group, but understanding that wounding can happen mm-hmm. Everywhere.
Right.
I would really recommend Insight Timer. There's a lot of different apps people can use. I like Insight Timer because it's free, although there is a paid level if you want to use that. But that's my go-to app of choice. I can just set the timer. There's all kinds of ways to customize that timer to make it suit my needs. But for any length of time that you want to practice, or they have guided practices on there. I even have a couple of guided practices on there for loving kindness meditation with your cat, or loving kindness meditation with a dog, because sometimes people they don't know how to access loving feelings, but they know how to love their dog, right? So tapping into that place of love and then expanding it out. And then I love books, right? So books have been very helpful for me. I wanted to recommend this book on embodiment called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. There's a lot of science in this book, but it's a very powerful book of helping us understand how the trauma that we've experienced in life is kept in our body, how we can process that and become free through embodiment practices.
Say that title again.
The Body Keeps the Score. Oh,
okay.
Book right here. So if anybody's visual, there's that.
The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der
Kolk. K-O-L-K.
K-O-L-K. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. It's an excellent one.
Yeah.
Another one along the lines of embodiment is My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem. And this deals with issues of race and embodiment. So that's also, it's like a bestseller right now too. It's out there. To be full disclosure, I haven't finished reading it, but I've gotten part of the way through. It is really powerful. Just on mindfulness itself, I would recommend Radical Compassion by Tara Brach. She talks you through RAIN. She introduces the concept of RAIN, which is essentially an acronym for doing insight meditation to recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture whatever is arising for you.
You've studied with her, right?
Yes. I'm in a certification program now. It will end in February. And Tara Brock and Jet Cornfield are the founders of this. And so, I mean,
and her books
I did see them when we started it, but now everything's Zoom. So
okay. Say her book title again?
Radical Compassion.
Radical Compassion. She has another one I noticed called Radical Acceptance.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah.
They're all very good.
Okay.
Radical Compassion is her newest one, and it really is focused around RAIN, which RAIN is it's an easy acronym, an easy way to understand how to process difficult emotions.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Pam, for joining us and taking the time to give us some insight into this field of mindfulness meditation. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your heart for this, and I love the way you're taking this to other people as well. So what's your website real quick?
PamHausner.com.
Okay.
PamHausner.com.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us at Spirituality Adventures, and we're glad that you tuned in today, and continue to follow us and stay with us. We'll have more to come. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. God bless you.
Thank you.
Harbor Media Production.